Welcome to Start Writing. I'm Joe Bendowski. Today we have an interview with Patrick Adams. He is a children's author who decided to go indie so that he could maintain more control over the vision of his books and the story and the illustrations that would go into them. So he's going to talk about some of the things he's tried that didn't work as he tried marketing children's books, and some of the things that he has found are working for him. I wanted to interview Patrick Adams mostly because it's a very different approach to the indie model. He's not selling ebooks, as these are very intensely illustrated works, and the target market is children, whereas very few children's books are being sold on the Kindle. There's been a recent development. They're working on a Kindle for children's books, and they have made some adaptations to the Kindle Fire to allow for some books to be done that way. But these are still burgeoning fields for the authors publishing in those fields. So he's doing all print sales, and so he's going to talk about some of the things that he's doing there to get it to work, and some of the issues he's encountered in getting create space to do what he wants with his illustrations and his text, and how he has dealt with those problems. So if you're writing for children and you're considering indie, it's definitely a good one to check out. So first off, we'll address this week in critiques. So I was reading the opening chapter of a novel this week, and in it, mostly what we're getting is kind of this Armageddon post-apocalyptic scenery and setting, and even as we talk about the people, it's all kind of done in this big summary in the first couple paragraphs. But then we focus in on an 8-year-old girl, and the writer is a strong writer. The scene promotes a lot of empathy. She's there. She's got her little teddy bear that she's, protecting, in everything that's going on. But as we begin to focus on this girl, she's the first character that we really focus on throughout the entire narrative so far. And she begins to feel like the POV character. The problem is that the language of the narrative doesn't fit an 8-year-old point of view character. And even more interesting, within a few minutes, we move on. We move back to the big crowd. And I think the real issue here is that because no other possible POV character has yet to appear, I'm trying to latch on to this one, and it just feels jarring because the language and the ideas within the language just feel beyond that 8-year-old. And then as soon as, I'm coming to terms with that, I'm yanked out and, kind of pointed out this is not the POV character. And so while the writer has a strong use of language in describing the scene and evoking empathy, the mechanics of this story, the POV character and the ability to draw me in and then keep me there are failing because I don't have a real POV character to follow yet. And so I think that was my big critique of this work this week, is not being able to latch onto a character that I could actually latch onto as the narrative flowed. It was 2 pages in before I found the real POV character. And I think that needs to be changed around. One, because this is how I see the world. This is who I'm going to kind of be connected to. And if you're shifting from one person to another without providing me that POV character early on, it's jarring for the reader. I think it's an avant-garde thing that you could do. But I consider it like James Joyce's Ulysses. He wrote this stream of conscious, and, it was this very unique, different way of approaching writing. But the truth is, it's a pain to read, and you read Ulysses just to experience that, and you never pick up another book like that again, because it's a jarring way to read a story. And that's the same thing that's happening here. There's this avant-garde approach to telling a story that the author is experimenting with. But once it's been done once, it's jarring to the reader. It doesn't make the experience optimally immersive. And I don't think this author is the first one to try this. It's been done before. We saw how it worked, and it played out, and it's not the best way to tell a story if the goal of the story is to immerse the reader. So that was my critique this week. So here is the interview with Patrick Adams. So my guest is Patrick Adams. Patrick, why don't you start off by telling us about the genre and the age group you're targeting, and then what it is you're writing for that age group.
Sure. So I have two different children's book series targeted at different ages. The first one that I started is called the Amazing Lisa series. That's targeted to kids 4 to 8 years old, and the books are really about travel. They weave a children's story, sort of an adventure type story, in with a different location from around the world. So as I envisioned this series sort of progressing along, it was, that's based on 3 of my kids, that they'd be in different spots in the world and they would have an adventure. And the Lisa character is a stuffed animal that is magical and can transform in anything. So she transforms into different things and facilitates their adventures in these different places. The other series I have is called Rhythm's World, and Rhythm is one of my other children, and that's geared more towards 1 to 4 year olds. So the story's a little bit simpler and much more, I think, focused on the artwork of what the story's about. So the first one is called The World of Rhythm. Well, it was about musical instruments, and the book features Rhythm, as I imagine her a little bit older than she is now, playing different instruments, from around the world. And then the second one is about professions. So this is, trying to, introduce, kids of that age to all the different people that could be important in their life, like teachers and doctors, nurses, librarians, bus drivers, and things like that.
So, okay. So you're a little bit different guest than we usually have on the show. Usually I deal with thriller writers and fantasy writers. But when I encountered you on Twitter, one of the reasons I want to talk to you is that you are a children's book writer. So these are colored, illustrated books, and you were self-published. And for me, I wondered, what is the avenue that you're going for that self-publishing and whatnot? So that's kind of stuff I want to get into to give kind of people a heads up. But first, because we are usually a craft-based show, talk to me about writing for children as far as studying that from a craft standpoint. How do you go about learning what words you can use and can't use and putting together a story for different age groups? Yeah,
so with the first series, the Amazing Lisa series, again, I try to gear that a little more towards 4 to 8, and I really bounced that off my own daughter, who was a little bit, just a little bit older than that age group, to try and see could she. I figured she would follow along with the story and so forth, and she gave me a little bit of feedback, and so then I tested it with some other kids who were in that age range to say, do they understand the story? Is there any sort of adjustment that I need to make in the way I'm presenting it? Yeah. And so I tested it right with that market audience right there.
So that sounds like a good idea. Is there any literature that you read or any classes that you took to help you with this, or did you wrote it and then you did some tests and adjusted accordingly?
Yeah, no, I didn't take any classes. I did study the children's book genre, and going through 3 children at the time and constantly reading them various children's books. They all loved children's books, so I got used to various styles, and really as it was geared towards their age group. So I'd be reading a children's book to my 6 or 7 year old son that was a little more detailed, and just for some examples, there were some SpongeBob books that I got that the story was a little more detailed and a lot more text to it. And then I would read to my daughter, who was 2, 3 at the time, and books like Gerald and Piggy, and just some other very simple, like Oswald, those type of books where the text was minimal and the illustration was the key thing. So a lot of my knowledge going into it was really based on my past experience with it.
Okay, sounds good. So this is the big topic I want to kind of address with you, is marketing. So first of all, how are you publishing your books for your audience?
Yeah, so I run it through CreateSpace. So I made the decision to self-publish. I did study quite a bit on, okay, what are the pros and cons of doing it this way? And what it boiled down for me was ultimately I wanted to control, basically everything about my book, the story, the illustrations, and really present my vision. So I chose the self-publishing route. And CreateSpace is a really good vehicle for that. They allow you their platform. You don't have to pay a cost to put your project on there. They've the standards are really easy to understand as far as what are the minimum page requirements, how do you need to format your covers and things like that. So I learned a lot going through my first book, Lisa Goes to England, about the process itself. And each time that I went through it, I learned a little bit more to the point now where I'm actually helping other children's book authors do this.
How are you marketing the book? So that's how you're publishing. How are you marketing these books? And I've got a lot of questions in this avenue. So just kind of start generally, and then we'll go from there.
I have a lot of things that I've tried.
Okay. So this actually, I had this. Tell me first what didn't work. What you would say if you're going this route, don't try this.
Okay. So I'll start with marketing lists. So there's plenty of companies out there who are willing to give you a list of contacts and names of people in the media and stuff like that, and you pay for the list, but it's an opportunity to get your information out there. And I have to say, with a list of 600 to 700 names, I got 2 responses. Probably most of it went to people's spam folders. And the responses that I got were people wanting to sell me advertising space in their magazines. So that's an avenue that, it was worth a try, but honestly, I would never really do that again.
So can you be a little more specific here? Was this like a blog tour list, or what kind of list were you buying here?
It was a list of contacts at magazines, at TV news stations, websites, blogs.
Okay.
Quite a smattering of media types.
Okay. So, all right. I just want a little more specific, because with the blog tours, I've got hit and miss for me. Some of the blog tours were really good for me, and some of them I feel like they didn't do anything. So, all right. So talk to me about some of the tools that you've put together for your marketing that are working.
Yeah. So one other thing before I get into that, you asked about things that didn't work.
If there's more, go ahead.
So award contests, and I admit this is a path I haven't gone down too often, but you figure if you can submit your book, and I've only done this with one, you pay a cost to get it in submitted for an award. If you come out and if you win, that's a nice little thing to attach to your book that would make your book a little more marketable, to say, hey, award winning, Lisa Goes to England, things like that. But not knowing enough about those and not educating myself enough on how those work, I opted out of that right away. I just kind of saw that as a money pit.
So you submitted to a contest and you won, and then it didn't impact your marketing, or you just kind of researched it and decided that it really wasn't worth digging around in?
No, I actually submitted to one and did not win.
Okay.
So it was, I can't really recall the name of the contest, but it was quite a wide variety of categories that they had. And, your book falls into a specific category, one out of like 40 that they have. So yeah, I think probably this particular reward contest got it, probably thousands of submissions. So, like I said, it was a one-time thing. I figured I'd give it a try, and it would take a lot to convince me to try that again.
So, yeah, well, and as I've talked with different authors about award contests, they usually will say, unless it's a very well-known contest, winning it doesn't matter and it won't impact your sales. And so, as my own research has kind of played out the same way.
Yep. And the one other avenue that I've tried only once, and again, not really knowing like for this particular magazine, how many readers did they have? What would the audience be for this? Would be actually to buy a magazine ad. So I did, when I had my second book out, I bought a magazine ad and advertised both of my books in this particular ad. But it's kind of one of those things where you really honestly can't measure the impact. If it doesn't lead to a sale or sales, then you really don't know who saw it. How did this impact anyone that saw it? Did they notice it at all?
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that it's kind of there and gone. They may never read that magazine a second time. So that was another avenue that I probably wouldn't try again unless it was really famous, well-known magazine. But so those are the couple that I've done that probably won't try again. So getting back to your question now about the things that have sort of given me some traction. Social media obviously is the biggest for me.
Okay.
Extremely active on Twitter, extremely active on Facebook, a little bit on Google Plus, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, just doing sort of different things, and using them for different reasons. Like for YouTube, that's really where I like to house my book trailers and stuff like that. Instagram, I have 2 accounts. One is really based on travel, which is more of a personal one, and then I've got the other one that's based on my my books. Pinterest I haven't dug too deeply into yet. I haven't quite figured Pinterest out yet, and how you would use Pinterest, as an advertising tool for your books. And Google Plus, I haven't seen much activity on that at all. But yeah, Twitter and Facebook are probably my most valuable marketing avenues right now. Okay,
so what is it you're doing on those 2 platforms that are working for you?
So with Twitter, it's really just posting and interacting with others, starting conversations, trying to just get more information about myself, my books, the services that I offer other children's book writers. And I actually met the client whose book I just published on Twitter. So I think that's probably been my best avenue to meet fellow authors and have conversations and a couple of potential clients off of Twitter. With Facebook, there's a lot of interaction, with people sharing your post. You could reach a fairly wide audience. The more people will share what you're posting and stuff like that. So that to me has been more of a friends and family type thing, but with a wide enough net and a lot of shares, the word can travel.
Okay. And so you mentioned your book trailers here, putting them up on YouTube. How much are you pushing them as a marketing tool, and how effective as it is? I know in the author community that I'm in, there's a lot of talk about how they look fancy but often don't convert well. But you're dealing with a much different demographic. So I'm curious as to how effective they are for you.
Yeah, children's books are just tailor-made for book trailers because you've got plenty of source material with the illustrations and things like that, and it kind of builds itself. So with the book trailers, I can't really say that they've ultimately impacted sales. I really don't know who's watched a book trailer and thought I have to buy that book. But for me, it's a cheap and easy marketing tool to put together. And I probably need to learn how to leverage those a little bit more so that I can get more views on them and learn maybe where to place them. How to use Vimeo maybe for videos. How should I craft my YouTube channel to get more people to look at it? And, do parents really let their kids go on YouTube and do these things? So it's taking where you put them, like kids. When you talk about marketing to kids, a lot of these things you've got to market to the parents to market to the kids. Right. There are some definite things that I know we'll get into where you do have face to face with the kids, but when you're using social media, you gotta I think strike at the parents and get them interested, and then they make the conscious decision to introduce that to their kids.
Right. Okay. So, are you familiar with the Kindle for Children's book that's in development, or with the animations for the Kindle Fire? These two new pieces here.
No, I'm not.
Okay. So, I was going to ask you about them, but if you're not familiar, then it's not relevant.
No, but I'm going to look into that.
Yeah. I have a friend who's writing a children's book, and I remember hearing about the Kindle for children's books, and I thought, if that works, that's a really good idea. And definitely open up the Kindle market to more children's books, because as you said, you're actually only doing paperback publishing, or I guess physical book publishing. You're not pushing Kindle because it's so illustration driven. Yeah,
and converting the children's books into ebooks has been a challenge. And with the Amazing Lisa series, I really had to work with the formatting of it, because the illustrations actually spread out over 2 pages. So I had to make the decision to shorten the illustration to be able to make it ebook readable. With the rhythm books, I did those a little differently and had an illustration per page. So those translated a little easier, but that was a lesson learned. As I'm considering using both paperback and ebook, that I have to prepare myself ahead of time for ebook conversion if I want it to look decent.
Yeah. So are you preparing to launch for Kindle Fire? Or I guess when you talk ebook, what is your plan there to build out an ebook?
So you mean just creating the ebook itself? Yeah,
like the formats and everything.
Sure. So I have a couple of different tools that I use for my first couple of books, I actually had somebody do it for me. But rather than paying the cost of somebody doing that, I just taught myself how to do it. So there's a couple of different formats. One is called EPUB, and the other one is Mobi, that work to get Kindle or Nook or any of those other tablet type readers. That those are kind of the source files that they use. So it's really about taking your book from PDF format and translating it to those 2 file types. Not an easy process. If it's just text that you have, that's one thing, but getting the images converted so that it looks good on a reader is a little more complicated. So I have 2 tools that I use. One is called Caliber, which is an ebook reader, but it's also something that allows you to edit your ebook. And I also use a program called Sigil, Sigil, which actually allows you to build the book from scratch. So what I've taken to doing here recently is pulling my book together on the Sigil program, and then saving that, uploading it to the ebook reader, and then finalizing the formatting there.
Okay.
And by the time I do all that, it's ebook ready for when I upload it.
So talk to me a little about editing the ebook in Caliber. So with my own books, I write in Word, and then I follow the formatting guidelines for converting that into an ebook. And then I go through Amazon, and that converts it to the Mobi for me. And then I take that Mobi and I convert it to an EPUB with Caliber, but I don't edit it in there. And one thing I've noticed, even today, I was looking over my ebook every once in a while, even though I've double checked the formatting in my Word doc, it'll not make a paragraph indentation where it should. That's probably the only formatting problem I encounter. But when I check the Word doc, I'm like, no, it says tab right there. You bring up all the formatting marks on your document. But for some reason, it's not doing that. So is that something you address in Caliber? Like you've got it there in the Mobi, and you can say, okay, it doesn't look the way it should?
Yeah, actually, I addressed that to start with in Sigil. That's where when I build the book and I create, I tend to bring the entire file in, and then I work with it to create the page breaks, the text, aligning the text the way it needs to be. Once I've got all of that, the page segmentation done, and, the right text is on the right page and all of that. That's when I save it, and that's when I upload it to Calibre. And in Calibre, in the edit feature, what I love about Calibre is that you have the reader, that you can actually see what your book looks like as it stands.
Yeah.
So, I have a baseline to start with, and I can kind of see what's wrong. So I can then immediately target, okay, I need to go fix this page. I need to make this image smaller. I need to, fix this text here. If there's any like spacing issues or stuff like that, I can catch that and actually go into the edit book feature in Calibre, to the particular page number that I created in Sigil, and then fix it right on that page. Working with the images, because they have the pages as one thing, but they also have the images as separate, to where you can actually go in and edit an image as just the image, and that will affect its appearance on that page. So that's how I work. Typically, my culprits are like about the author picture, about the illustrator picture. Sometimes those tend to be a lot bigger, and I can shorten them for the ebook to get everything back on the one page. And my ultimate goal is to have the illustration and the text that goes with that illustration on one readable ebook page, and then it's a seamless transition through the rest of the book.
So that's something I'll definitely have to look into, because for some reason Amazon is having some trouble with those conversions, and I haven't addressed it too much on how to fix a couple of issues.
Yeah, and I went through what you're talking about with the first couple of books. I tried getting Amazon to do the first one, and what they spat back, I wouldn't have wanted anybody to look at. Just hideous, and so that's why I sought help out. And even with the first person that helped me, what she ended up doing, because the pages or the illustrations were across two pages, she ended up cutting my illustrations in half. And so you'd have half the illustration and then the text for that page, and then the other half of the illustration and the text for the next page. So, that took away from, I think, the power of the illustration itself. So when I went back and redid those, that's where I taught myself. And this is where the picture formatting really helped. I taught myself how to get it onto one page. And then the worst that I would have is the illustration is there, and then maybe the text goes into a second page rather than a split illustration.
Yeah, I imagine they'll address that at some point as self-publishing of children's books become bigger, because in traditional marketing, they do ones where the image covers two pages and it's fine. So I imagine at some point they'll fix that.
Right. Yeah. I guess it all depends on the reader as well. I think if you're looking at something on a tablet versus your phone, and it's got to work for everything.
That's true. That's complicated. Okay. So one of the things that I saw that you sent me is you mentioned merchandising. Yep. Have you started doing that? How are you going about it? And what are you making? And I guess what's your predictive models there if it's in your upcoming projects? Yep.
So from the Amazing Lisa book series, the main character is a pink stuffed dog. And I had the illustrator of that book. My requirements for him was to draw this stuffed animal with distinctive features, because in each of the books, she morphs into something different. So, but I wanted her to keep the features no matter what she morphed into. So when Lisa goes to England, she's a flying horse. In Lisa Goes to France, she's a race car. So, but the distinctiveness of the stuffed animal was important to me as she morphed into these things. So the illustrator came back, I gave him some basic requirements, but he drew a nice, pink color with some white, some brown patches, and some distinctive markings on her. So that to me, even from the first book on, was just tailor-made. I always had it in my mind that I wanted to create a stuffed animal based on that Lisa character. So just recently, I worked with Budsies, and I sent them one of the illustrations of Lisa from the books in her original form, the stuffed animal form. and I had a prototype made and loved it. It was perfect. And, I put it online and so forth and started to get several pre-order requests for it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So that's an example of something that, okay, maybe I've got something with this. So the only issue with the thing was it was huge. It was a 16-inch, and so I put in a bulk order for 8-inch versions of the stuffed animal. So I'm planning as I do book shows and stuff like that, and as we go back to marketing avenues, I figured it would be just a great addition to not only have the books, but to have the stuffed animal with the books as an attractive sort of draw for kids that are at these shows.
So, yeah, that actually sounds like a really good idea, particularly with your audience that you're targeting. Okay.
And with that particular one, it lends itself to, if this works, really, really well and becomes a big piece of the business, because the Lisa character morphs into different things in every book. The possibilities are endless as to what I could create with it.
So, okay. All right. And then I guess my final question here is, so you mentioned before you met a person who became one of your clients. So talk to me about your publishing company, specifically what it's doing, what it's looking for, and just the whole vision there.
Sure. So I offer really end-to-end consulting help for children's book authors. My typical client would probably be somebody who has maybe written their first book, or just wants some help taking a story that they have and sort of bringing it to life. So with my with the client whose book I just published, I met her on Twitter, and she had a story that she had written actually when she was in high school. And so what I was able to help her with is I also represent an illustrator who's done a couple of my books. I was able to provide her the illustrator, and then I helped her ultimately format the book out to be, this is what Create Space is going to need. We're going to need to turn the story into X number of pages. So I worked with her to kind of create the right separation for the text to say, okay, this is a scene here, this is a scene here, until we had a cohesive story that wasn't overwhelming in text on each page, considering the target audience she was going for. So we got her illustrations done, and then I worked with her to get the Create Space set up. I had a stockpile of ISBN numbers, which are one of those things that as you self-publish, you learn you need to either have or get assigned to you. It helped her through the copywriting piece. And then ultimately I published the book through my company, Patrick Adams Books. So I run all of my books now through my company, and I offer the clients though the option when they come on with me to say, okay, we can publish through my company, or you can publish, or you can have your name listed as the publisher. It's really up to them. Mm-hmm. The key thing for them to understand is that they have 100% ownership of this when the product is done. And I'm really here to just kind of help them go through this difficult process of bringing a story to life in pictures and then taking it from there. So the book is called Chocolate Milk, and the author is Alexandria Rizek.
Okay. All right. So that was it on my end. Was there anything that you think I missed or that you wanted to bring up and talk about?
I can just kind of close the loop on some of the other things that I've tried marketing wise. I mentioned book shows, local book shows and things like that, where you can get in, set up a table and sell your books are great. I went to an international book fair. I actually went to the one in Frankfurt, really just to kind of scout it out and see what it was like. Not really sure what that would do with sales, but that could introduce you to a lot of people in the industry. And then you've got other things like Etsy, where you can sell autographed versions of your book.
So these are things that have worked for you?
Some have, some still trying to make work. but they feel like they're Etsy. You can put something on Etsy and it's 20 cents a month for a listing. So it's not an expensive way to go. And you could get some decent sales out of that with the Etsy community.
Huh. Have you seen like novels there, or is it more children's books?
I've seen more children's books. I actually don't think I've seen people put novels or full-length books, but I have seen a couple of children's books.
Okay.
And I figured that'll get enhanced once I have the bulk order of the
stuffed
Lisa
animals.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So the book shows, and then that, and anything else you've tried that's working, or your child pretty sure can work. You just have to figure out the details.
I would love to get into classrooms. I actually got my book into some classrooms, but doing readings and stuff like that, and just getting out in front of the target audience more. I would love that. Getting books into independent bookstores is something that I'm going to start really looking into. And I've started working with a publicist as well, who's kind of helping me with contacts and book blog tours and things like that.
So, all right. Sounds great. Well, why don't you tell the audience where they can find you and your stuff?
Sure. So my website is patrickadamsbooks.com. You can find me on Facebook at Patrick Adams Books, Twitter at Pat Adams Books. That's PATADMAMS Books. Instagram, Patrick Adams Books. My Amazon author page, amazon.com/author/Patrick Adams Books.
Great. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for listening to Start Writing. As always, we would love it if you would head over to iTunes or whatever app you're using to listen and leave us a review. If you want to sign up for the newsletter, you can do that at joseph-bendosky, that's BENDOSKI.com, and then just click under the Start Writing heading and you can sign up for the newsletter there. And as always, if you want to support the show, check out one of our books. Yeah, and we would love to hear if there's any feedback on the vocabulary episodes. Maybe you want us to approach them differently or whatnot. I imagine if they're not something of interest in you, you're just not downloading and listening to them. But let us know. Thanks.